Hello and welcome to the United Daily. If you're watching or listening to this anywhere that isn't our YouTube channel, why not come and join our ever-growing Red community over on YouTube? Go to youtube.com/all4united. And of course, you can join in with every United Daily show, Monday through to Friday, around lunchtime in the UK. We will be live with different guests, different fans, chatting about the biggest talking points to do with Manchester United. You can come and join in exclusively in the live chat as and when the shows are broadcast live. And of course, if you want to listen back to any of our previous United Daily episodes, please do go to your podcast platform of choice and search All for United, United Daily. I'm Ben. It's good to be here on a Friday. We're at the end of another week. Hope you're staying safe and well. And today we're joined by Norwegian journalist Jonas Giæver is with us. Jonas, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Yeah, really good, mate. We haven't caught up since the summer, which you came on and we spoke about lots of transfer stuff. So hopefully you're well, hopefully you're good. And today I'm really looking forward to talking about our manager. Because I thought you would be perfect. Being a fellow Norwegian, you're a lover of football. We've spoken a lot about Manchester United and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in the past. I thought you would be the perfect person to come on and chat about Ole. Balanced as well, objectively, because obviously Ole is a cult hero here. I take it he's a legend and he's a cult hero in Norway as well. I'm sure many people within the Norwegian press also follow Ole's career and have followed Ole's career throughout. So I thought, seeing as now, with the last Premier League game that we played, Ole has now joined the 100 Premier League manager club, which means that he's managed 100 games in the league. What perfect time to sit back and analyse Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the manager. So, Jonas, let's start. Early days, Mould, coming through to Cardiff. Going back to Mould, tell us about the early days of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's management and what you saw of him out there in Norway.
Well, he was hired by Molde because he'd done such a great job at the Man United reserves, hadn't he? And they were celebrating their centenary, and they sort of decided that they wanted to bring back their hero, sort of the I suppose the boyhood club sort of thing, that bringing him back and making him sort of responsible for the centenary, because they hadn't won the league. I mean, Molde had gone 100 years without winning the league, and in their centenary season, he came in and he won the league on his first try. So he instantly became a hero. Obviously, he was given great backing by the owners. Molde are known to have pretty rich owners, and they decided to back Ole from the start. And basically, it was success at first try. So I mean, and he had a great stint there. He kept Molde in the top. I mean, they were becoming, alongside the Rosenborg, was traditionally been the big side in Norway. They became sort of the second team, or at times the first team in Norway as well, even though historically Rosenborg have been ahead. But he kind of shifted the power in Norway in giving it to Molde, who had always been sort of always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And it finished second on a number of occasions, I believe. So he came in and revolutionized Molde to a large degree, and I mean he was a legend there as a player, because he went from Molde to Manchester United, and then obviously coming back and winning the league for them as well. So he's tremendously important in their history, and I'm going to assume he's always going to have the door open at Akestad if he is ready to return.
Sorry about my rubbish British pronunciations, by the way. I'm sure we're going to have a show full of them today. I'm sure we are. And I'm sure I'm not. It's fantastic hearing about how we managed to jump from the reserves over to obviously a side which have always been in and around, as you've just said there, but actually managed to create a atmosphere, managed to create and solidify really a club in terms of becoming one of the clubs up there in Norway. Just from his early days, again, going back maybe to his first spell, maybe you can hit on how that translated into his second spell as well. What did he bring? Because at United, we've seen him bring, obviously, back the feel-good factor at United when it comes to adapting our philosophy to attacking football. Was that always the way in Norway during the early days? But also his management. He seems to be able to inspire players. Was that all evident from his early days, or were there other areas which he impressed in?
I've spoken to a few of the players, especially a player called Mathias Moström, who played with him in his first spell and his second spell at Molde. And what he's told me, and what I've kind of understood, is that he brought a winning mentality about him. He brought an aura. I mean, it was sort of a perhaps the most famous Norwegian footballer returning to Norway to manage their side. I mean, everyone sort of were on their toes, but at the same time, he was demanding, but it was demanding in a way that was respectful, and he explained himself, and it wasn't sort of him thinking he was better than anyone else, because he obviously understood the role of a player as well as the role of a manager, and he brought a lot of, I suppose, the things that he learned from Sir Alex Ferguson. So it was more so of him understanding what needed to be done, and playing in a way that was more aligned with the players that he had, because Norway traditionally, during the 90s and also in the early 2000s, we played a very physical style. We were always much more ruthless than our opponents in terms of physical preparation. Our national teams in the 94 and 98 World Cup were pretty impressive in that we were better trained. I mean, our physical training and nutrition was better than everyone else. And then everyone caught up with us, and we weren't able to sort of catch up with them again technically, meaning that Norway has always been, or for the, I suppose, 20 years almost, we've always been behind the rest of the world, even though in 93 we were, I believe, second in the FIFA world rankings. I mean, our fall has been pretty big, but what Solskjaer has done is he's at Molde, he sort of broke with the tradition that was to play physical, I suppose, on the counterattack, focusing on set pieces, and playing more of a continental style, using the ball, being attacking, and going against the grain in that aspect, but then again being very successful doing so.
Yeah, of course. His first spell out of Norway in the Premier League was with Cardiff. When he decided to make that jump, what were people saying in Norway?
Why?
Can you remember? Yeah, why? Literally, why? Yeah. Well, what did you make of that move from him?
He took a chance. No, I mean, he took a chance, and I think that it was a great learning experience for him, first and foremost, because I don't think he was that ready, and I think he's admitted as much, that it was a bit too much too soon, and he was going to a club that was already in trouble, and I mean, it wasn't sort of a fresh start for him. He had to deliver from the get-go, and I don't think he was ready to do that. And also his player recruitment was pretty horrible. I mean, he recruited heavily, at least 2 or 3 players, I believe, from the Norwegian top division, which at the time was not even close to the Premier League. And even though a few of the players have obviously had good careers afterwards, I believe they just weren't able to go in and deliver. I don't remember how many players he actually bought. I think he had about, was it 12 or 13 players that he brought in? It was just too many players and too big of a change, and the team was already struggling, and it was a bad move from him. I remember he was close to going to Aston Villa previous to that, and he'd been to Birmingham, and I believe that Randy Lerner, the previous owner, had flown in a private jet to Molde to pick him up and to talk to them, and they eventually couldn't agree on a deal, and he ended up staying in Molde. But I think that move would have made more sense at the time. But the Cardiff move just, yeah, it didn't sit right, considering the fact that, I mean, Vincent Tan was the owner, and it was a club that was just marauded in controversy. So I think that was a bad move from him, and I think that even though he probably won't admit it to it, I think he would agree to that. But also he must have learned a lot from that, because I think that he's more meticulous in how he chooses and picks the clubs and the chances that he takes, because when he returned to Molde, there was never really any question of him leaving. I mean, he wouldn't have left Molde, I believe, unless a club like Manchester United came to get him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You said there about learning. He was a young manager. He made that decision to come back to the Premier League. I mean, what young manager doesn't want to manage in the Premier League? Like, what an opportunity. I think that you're right. He brought in quite a lot of players in that January, because he took over in the January, didn't he? And lasted in that half of the season when they were in dire straits then. And I remember he loaned Zaha from United at that point. And I was sat here itching my head going, we need to see a better Wilfried Zaha. We're sending him to a side that's clearly going to get relegated. It made no sense whatsoever, some of those transfers. So it's really, really interesting that he made that move. The learning curve, as you said, was massive. And then obviously went back out to Molde and continued managing there. Would you say you saw a different Ole second time round in Norway? Or do you think he just managed to re-find himself when he came out of that horror show at Cardiff and managed to reposition himself and put himself in a better place, a more comfortable place with his second managerial spell in Norway?
I think that would be correct, and I think that he had more emphasis on youth at the time when he came back, and more emphasis on developing players and developing his style. I mean, at the time when he had left, Rosenborg had sort of regained position again as the dominant side in Norway, and even though Molde had a season where they won the cup in the league without him as well, I still think that Rosenborg was sort of retaining or getting back their stronghold of Norwegian top flight, which, I mean, to those who don't know, I mean, Rosenborg sort of have the economical power and sort of the prestige of, if you're a good Norwegian player, you would likely want to play either there or at Molde. And the reason why Molde is so popular is by and large because of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But besides that, I think that he returned and he had a greater emphasis on developing players and developing a system, even though he also had one or two big purchases. But in terms of him changing, I just think that he was more. He wasn't thinking about moving himself. I think he was thinking more about moving the club upwards the table and upwards in terms of developing players and upwards in terms of, I suppose, their standing. Whereas I think that in his first spell, his thoughts and focus were on going to the Premier League, going to manage Manchester United one day, for example. So I think that he kind of settled a lot more in his second spell than in his first spell.
Jonas, a lot of people have been tweeting in some different bits and pieces that I want us to get onto later on. But for anyone watching live who's in the live chat, hello to Justin, Heli, Alexander, Jacob, Alex, Brown Knights on board with us. The United Way, the OGS effect. Hope you guys are good. Hello to Mike as well. Loads of people sounding off in the live chat. If you want to get involved with a couple of bits that we're doing on the show today, I want to hear from about two things from each of you guys. So if you're watching this show now, get in the live chat. I want to hear from you the most memorable moment of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's managerial career at United. Got a few to pick from, to be honest. There have been some fantastic performances. And also one area which you love about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's management. And I've had quite a few tweets in today, and it's interesting where people vary with their thoughts on Ole. And obviously we're going to get into pain points with him and the fantastic points with him in a bit. As you say, he's still a young manager, especially at the top flight, especially at a club like United. And as we're continuing that story of his career, Jonas, it's only natural for me to come to you and say about that moment that he took over at United as caretaker manager. United done a deal with Molde. What was it like? Was it mayhem in Norway at that point? They're seeing their star boy, an icon, a legend, going and managing one of the biggest clubs in the world.
Couldn't believe it, to be honest with you. It was just, is this really happening? It was sort of, because when they fired Jose Mourinho, you sort of were thinking, all right, who was available? And I think that a lot of people were discussing at the time a guy like Laurent Blanc, for example, who was unemployed. So I was thinking, well, that makes sense. And then I started to see the rumors in the British press, and I was thinking, well, he has a contract. I mean, they're not going to loan him out, but at the same point, if they're going to get, I just couldn't see him taking an interim job and then leaving his full-time job, I suppose, at Molde for someone else to take. But I mean, when it really started to solidify itself, I mean, the Norwegian press and the Norwegian people were sort of, the nation stood still just waiting for it to happen. And when it eventually got confirmed, I mean, it broke Norwegian news. I mean, everyone was reporting on it, every single outlet, everyone wanted to scoop, everyone wanted to know what was going on. It was, as you said, complete mayhem. And his club didn't want to say anything. He didn't want to say anything. Everyone was radio silent, just waiting for Man United to communicate it. And whereas we saw, obviously, with British press, I mean, every single media outlet reporting he had gotten a job, it was we sort of understood that this was happening. But at the same time, when that official announcement came, it was just, wow, we have a fellow Norwegian who was managing the biggest club in the world. That's pretty unique, you know. It was, and I remember it was just every single day after that, it was just story after story after story. And everyone was reading sports news at the time because of him. And I mean, you could have basically written almost anything about him. I mean, here he lands, for example, or here his plane lands, and that would get like 1 million views almost. I mean, it was crazy. And it got even crazier once he had his first match against, I believe it was Cardiff, wasn't it? So when that happened as well,
instant 5-1, it was crazy.
Yeah, I believe that even broke viewer records as well. So I mean, it was just, he became the national darling, and even people that didn't care about football at all, they were tuning into the games, watching it because it was him. So and we are naturally a very Anglophile country, but it really got, even worse, if you could say that. I mean, it was Anglophile to the max here in Norway, and everything Man United. I mean, kits were sold out. It was just, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy the first couple of weeks, months there.
Yeah, it's fantastic to hear that side of the story from you, because obviously here with the English press and what they're like with young managers and former professional managers as well, get put on a pedestal because what they've made from their name, and then potentially when times are tough, the press are straight down their neck.
Yeah.
We're going to get onto that in a second, but it's fantastic to hear that this wasn't just a celebration and a proud moment for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer becoming the manager of Manchester United, the club he spent so much time at, but a proud moment for a country, which I think is just heartwarming. It's what sport can do, right?
Yeah, it is. But at the same time, we have we sort of don't want to become too Anglophile here in Norway as well. I mean, we have a term which is called nisselue, which basically translates to Santa's hat, which means that you're pulling the hat over your eyes, I suppose, and being sort of you're looking at it through I suppose a unique Anglophile way. I mean, that the Premier League is the best and everything English is good. So everyone was saying that we couldn't become too, worked up with it being Man United. And I mean, he has to perform and everything else. So you had those that were super positive about it, but then again, you also have those who were super negative about it as well. So, but I think for the first couple of months, there was just, I think the nation in some aspects were a little bit shocked by it, because it was, even our prime minister sort of tweeted about it. And it was just, it was crazy there for a while. And I mean, when I say it broke records, it definitely did break records. I remember when I understood this has become sort of a mania sort of thing. It was the local paper in his hometown, which is called Kristiansund. They had a story in which they'd run into his math teacher, and where she sort of said, "Oh, I remember having him in my math classes. Congratulations to him." And it was just, we're at the point now where even his math teacher in elementary school is getting pressed. So I was like, that's all right. This has reached completely different terms of craziness.
Yeah, it's on a different planet, isn't it?
Yeah.
So now he's had quite a bit of time at United. As I said, he's in the Premier League 100 club now, with a majority of those games manager of Manchester United. Of course, in his, so to speak, interim spell, the 18 to 19, the half the season that he got, finished on 66 points, ended up finishing, I think it was sixth, wasn't it, in his first season, although it wasn't a full season. And then last year, you called him consistent. It was 66 points again, but this time we managed to finish third with a fantastic run of form, off the back of the pandemic and obviously off the back of lockdown, which really saw us to third place. And in some ways at that point, potentially an overachievement after a horrendous Christmas that year. Really, really difficult, where people were already talking about how long is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer going to be manager of this football club. And we fast forward to this season and where we're at now in a title race. And even though at times this season as well, we've heard those stories come out and fans get on his back after we exited the Champions League, our poor start to the season, people questioning him. What have you made of his United journey so far?
I think that we were sort of in agreement with the English press, I suppose, and in terms of him being on the brink during that Christmas period, and seeming that he would get fired, especially considering that Mauricio Pochettino was still available at the time. So it's not like we were sort of trying to gloss over it. I think we were being very realistic here as well. That at the time it looked very, very bleak for him, and it would have made sense if he was fired. But I think that, and it's perhaps a little bit controversial to say, but I think that both the recruitment of Bruno Fernandes and him just being, I mean, the greatest signing in Man United history, almost, you'd think. I mean, close to being one of the best signings the club has ever done. And the pandemic also giving United time to regroup, because they were in a pretty bad spells when the pandemic happened. I think that in some aspects, even though that's very controversial to say and perhaps a little bit too, I suppose, too black and white, I think it helped him in some aspects being able to regroup and being able to set his team up again. So I think that helped him in some aspects, but then again, I think it's all credit to him for being able to do that. He took advantage of good recruitment of the Fernandes, and also advantage of the situation handed to every single team in Europe, and that the leagues were stopped. So he was able to bounce back, and I think that what he's done this season and on the back end of last season, I think it is all credit to him. But it also underlines that he is a manager who believes in his own system, and I don't think that his confidence is ever that shook, and I don't think that he ever starts doubting himself, because he's a manager who's always been very hard-headed, and he's been a guy who's always been very hard-headed. I remember when they were thrashed at Everton, when he said he's going to be successful at Man United, and some of the players that were delivering that game or weren't delivering, rather, were not going to be, and some of those players are not at Man United anymore. So but I think that the thing that he's lacking is he needs a trophy. He needs something to sort of, some silverware or something to hang his hat on, I suppose, and say, look, I achieved this, because that is sort of the only thing he's missing at the point.
Yeah, I think a couple of things I want to hit on there. Actually, with the trophy argument, I do agree he really does need to win a trophy, not just for the club at the moment and to get some fans off his back, but also for him and his confidence. You don't want that voodoo over your head that you go out in semi-finals or you go out in finals and your team bottles it when they need to perform at the most. You don't want that over your head as a manager. But also, like, we look at United recently, and we've won trophies with managers and they've still not been given time, not been given the backing, and not been given the support. So it goes one of two ways, doesn't it? You don't want United to win a trophy or do something really well under Ole for the board or whatever, whoever makes these stupid decisions, to turn around and go, well, but you done this. So, if you don't achieve this again, then bye. Because that's just a ridiculous way to manage a club. So yeah, I do completely agree with you, but then I've always got that at the back of my head, and I just want to sound off on some points that are being made in the live chat. Heli makes a point that he's only ever one loss away from the sack. He's so true. Like, that's how quickly people get on Ole's back, and it's the same with is it Tunku here as well. Every time Ole is under pressure, he wins. That takes some belief. I just want to revert back to some comments you've already made, Jonas, in terms of about him going into Molde and being a winner. Really delivering an ethos around the club that they can win, really being positive with his management style and the way that he manages players and the club and his project, the future, how that looks, how fresh and vibrant that is. I think it says a lot about the trust and the good work Ole and the management team are doing at United at the moment with this project that they've got going on, that the likes of Allegri, Poch, Tuchel have all been available. Fantastic managers have been available. And United have gone, no, we might be in a bad patch at the moment, but we absolutely trust what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and his team are doing. And I think that deserves enormous credit to Ole.
I do agree. And to hit on one of the points that were made there, that he's always one loss away from the sack. I think the reason for that is because, as you pointed out here, there are so many fantastic, brilliant managers who've been out there who are proven winners and proven it in bigger leagues than he has. And I think that's sort of what counts against him, that he hasn't performed that at Juventus, at a Borussia Dortmund, at a Real Madrid, at a Ajax. He's performed in Norway. And I mean, our league is interesting in itself, but the level is not even close to any of the big leagues in Europe. So I think that's always what counts against him. And that's why sort of he's still viewed as unproven. And he is, at some aspects, he is unproven. But I think that if he was to be fired at Man United today, I would imagine that there's several of the Premier League teams that would be looking at him thinking perhaps he can come and do a job here. I'd love to see him, if he was to be fired, to try himself still in the Premier League, because it's obvious that he has the level to perform. But in saying that, also, I think that he's part of a project that's, in terms of reverting Manchester United back to one of the big teams in Europe. I think that there's so much more to him.
That's a huge job, isn't it, Jonas? Like, it's
a huge job.
It's massive.
But look at how they're doing it, though. They're doing it through youth. They're doing it through trying to get young players. And I believe I was reading from his press conference today, I think it was, where he was talking about Shortire and Hannibal Mejbri being players that he wants to put into his first team squad, and that kind of says something about him.
So with that, what they've done, Jonas, so I don't know if you're aware. So because at the moment, in I don't know if it's the same in Norway or the other parts of the footballing planet that you cover, but at the moment, obviously the bubbles have to be really solid. So you can't sort of mix training with the under-23s and training with the first team squad. So whenever these younger players like Ahmad, Mejbri, Shortire, they have to go and play for the under-23s. They're training with the first team, and then they've got to travel on their own to play those games. So it makes it difficult, but it shows the trust he's got in those youth players to be sensible in the fact that he's letting them do that. It's not affecting their game time, but they're getting the experience with the first team.
Exactly. And that is what I especially saw in the second spell at Molde as well, that I tried to get a lot of young players in. And what I think is interesting about him is he has a knack for doing this, and he keeps looking at players and he keeps saying, oh, that's my Paul Scholes, or that's my Roy Keane, or that's my Andy Cole, or that's my Kanchelskis. And I mean, it became sort of satire in Norway that he keeps doing that. And I think that he looks at Bruno Fernandes, for example, and says, that's my Eric Cantona. And perhaps he looks at a guy like Shortire or Meshbrin and says, that's my David Beckham in 1993. And that's my Paul Scholes in 1995, for example. I mean, he has a knack for doing that. And I think that he's trying to model his teams on the teams that he's played for himself and also of the Man United teams of the past. And those teams were built on youth. And I think that he really does believe in that Man United is a team that needs to promote youth. And he's not afraid of doing that, especially considering that they've shown their level at under 23s and probably has done so in first team practice as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I want to hit on a few really positive points with Ole, memorable moments, but also other little bits and pieces that I feel like he really is shining through, that are really shining through as attributes from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as a manager that I don't think gets spoken about enough. And maybe this one does, but I suppose it's man management. It's the way we've just spoken about young players, how he manages those, he believes in them, he installs trust into them and brings them through as and when it's ready. But also, I underratedly think his man management of Donny van der Beek's actually been really good this season. You've also seen Tuchel called out Ziyech the other night for having a poor performance. You'd never see Ole do that with Van der Beek. He knew at the start that Van der Beek was going to take time to settle, and now he is, I think, managing him really well. The Pogba situation before the Leipzig game and the form Pogba was in after that. I think the way that he has dealt also with players like Juan Mata, clearly giving them a big role behind the scenes. We've all seen the videos of him practicing free kicks and corners and working solely with Bruno Fernandes. He makes better play. He makes other players better players because of those he situates around them. What have you made of Ole's man management at United? And has this always been a good trait of his?
Yes, it's always been one of the things that he's been hailed for, and that he's been. I mean, again, going back to the talks I've had with players there, they've always stated that his door is always open, and there are a good few of the players. He takes his time to get to know them, get to know their families, get to know them on a personal level. If they have an issue, they can always come to him and talk about it. He'll always be able to come with advice and sort of either give him a stern talking to when he understands that they need that, and also the arm around the shoulder. He's always stated that it's interesting or important rather to identify who needs what kind of character are you? Are you a guy that needs to be told that you're good, or are you a guy that needs to sort of be kicked around a little bit? I believe he compared Dwight York and Andy Cole once, and Dwight York was the type of guy that he needed to know that he was performing horribly, and Ferguson identified that early on, whereas Andy Cole needed that arm around the shoulder. It was either that or the way around, but he said that it impressed him so much that he was able to see that, and he tried to implement that into the way he's managing as well, and that's sort of what the players at Molde have also been familiar with, that he's able to identify that. And certain players would obviously get a rollicking in at halftime or after practice or whatever, but some would also sort of be taken aside and say, look, you're not performing to the level that you are, but I know that you can perform. And also you were saying this about Van de Beek. Also, he's able to say, look, the next 3 games, you're not going to be in my squad, but for that third game, look at the calendar. That third game is a big one. You will play that game. You will play a part. And that player will be even more motivated than the rest of the players during practice, because he knows that, all right, I got to show that I'm able to perform in that third game coming up in 2 weeks' time, for example. So he's good at identifying those types of things. And his man management has sort of been perhaps the one thing that's been undisputed in Norway, that he's been so excellent at that.
I think you might agree with it, Jonas, but that sounds like one of the traits that you picked up from the greatest manager ever. Because whenever people talk about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's man management, it just sounds very much like what Sir Alex Ferguson used to do in his heyday. Yeah. And again, Sir Alex always said that Ole was the best watcher of a game and the best always the best player who understood what was going on and the reasons why for doing stuff behind the scenes. And I think that's showing with his man management. I just want to read out a couple of tweets and a couple of messages here. Shiv says his man management is fantastic. He handled the Pogba situation last month really well, and he's got Pogba before the injury playing really, really well again. Loads of people sounding off about his man management as well. I just want to pick up this from Ruben as well. Maybe you can hit on this, Jonas. He's put my favourite thing about Ole is he knows the club inside out and its values. He's more of a fan than any world-class manager out there that values their own ego and CV more than the club itself. Potentially not the best tactician, but deserves more than some people think based on the progress we are seeing right now. Do you think the fact that he knows the club really well helps him and suits him in this situation and being the manager of Manchester United?
Oh, obviously he knows what he's going to. He knows the culture, he knows the history, he knows exactly what the club is built on. But I also think that the backside to that is sort of, if he is to perform horribly and if he is to perform in a way that would deserve the sack, as we saw during Christmas time, I think it's always been harder to sack managers that have an alignment to the club. I mean, look at Frank Lampard, for example, when he was sacked at Chelsea. Now, there were certain people that were like, well, he deserves more time. But if you look at the results, perhaps he didn't. But because Frank Lampard is who he is at Chelsea, I mean, it's so difficult to fire him. Kenny Dalglish at Liverpool was the same. Looking at Real Madrid, for example, with Zidane, I mean, there's so many people saying that Zidane should be fired, but it's just not going to happen because he has such an important place in that club's history. And also in his aspect, I mean, he also won 3 straight Champions League trophies as a manager. So I suppose that one is a little bit more difficult. But I just think that just looking at it, to hire a manager that has such a historic point in the club or has such a historic time at the club as a player, I think it's always been more difficult to fire those. And I mean, it's sort of the thing, if you fire Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I mean, you'll fire the guy who won the Champions League trophy in the last minute against Bayern Munich in 1999. I mean, it's just, I think it's a little bit more difficult than to fire Louis van Gaal, for example. Or David Moyes for that aspect, because they don't have that sort of connection to the club that Solskjaer has. But the other way around, they won't understand the club at the same or with the same principles that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would do, because he's lived it, he's understood it, he's been there for the most successful time in the club's history.
Another part of that message mentioned about Ole the tactician. So what do you make of Ole the tactician?
I don't know, because
there's times
I think it's difficult. No,
there's times he gets it absolutely spot on, and times he gets it horribly wrong. But
who doesn't?
Yeah, I agree.
Doesn't?
Yeah,
I agree. My thing is who does. I mean, the thing is that I think that he's judged harsher on it because he doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the cachet of a Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp or something like that. So he's judged even harsher on it. But yes, I think that tactically he perhaps is not number one, but I just don't see that as perhaps the biggest necessity for a club like Man United at all times. It is important, but Louis van Gaal was a great tactician as well, and he just couldn't get his tactics to work at Man United. Jose Mourinho, the same. So I'm not sure if the greatest tactical managers would be able to perform as well as at Manchester United as, for example, the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I mean, Ferguson as well, a lot of people say that he wasn't the greatest tactician, and it's still sort of talked about in Spain that in the 99-2000 season, Real Madrid just completely out-tacticked Man United at Old Trafford with Vicente Del Bosque as their manager, because Ferguson at the time just didn't see the necessity for playing a three-man midfield, whereas Real Madrid did so. And even though they had a weaker team than Man United at the time, they completely outplayed Man United because they understood how to create numbers in midfield and completely play around Manchester United. So I just don't think being a great tactician necessarily translates to you being a great manager at all times. And even though he has a lot to learn still, he has a lot to improve upon. As you said, for example, I remember was it the away game in the FA Cup against Arsenal where he just completely out-countered Arsenal time and time again. And even though that Arsenal looked the better side or were in better form or something like that, United completely just played him off the pitch. And I believe that was in his 3rd or 4th game as Man United manager. So that he is able to do so. And as you alluded to yourself, the Tottenham game where Rashford scored the 1-0 goal and they won that game. Again, great tactical display, but it kind of falls away when he loses 7-2 at home to Jose Mourinho's Tottenham. And then he's sort of the Norwegian PE teacher who doesn't know anything about football. So again, as someone, I believe it was Helle that you were referring to earlier, who stated that, yeah, he's one loss away from the sack at all times, and that comes from him not having that cachet that the likes of Mourinho, Klopp, Guardiola, Allegri, Zidane, that they do have.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what doesn't help him, Jonas? The fact that for some reason in the football fan world and in this crazy world that we live in, all of a sudden everyone's a tactician. And everyone has the right to call out tactics. Like there's so many different, and fair play to anyone who does what they do. I'm not disputing anyone out here, but there is too much emphasis on tactics. Like especially when straight after a game you've won it, I just want to celebrate and enjoy the fact we've won. Look at the goals back, like be cool. And all of a sudden, there's like 101 videos on what Manchester United tactically done wrong during that win, what Manchester United tactically done right, and it's just like who cares? You play football to win or lose at the end of the day. Leave that stuff down to the management team. And if something consistently goes wrong, which someone made the comment earlier on, Ole always bounces back. There's not been really a consistent, I'm on about like a long-term bad patch that he hasn't bounced back from. I think don't make problems that you don't need. You don't fix what's not broke. That's a popular saying over here.
I just think that we live in a completely different era. I always looked upon this era of football fandom as the why and how era, whereas previously we were in the who, when, and what era. I mean, it was simpler because the information was not as available as it is today. I mean, if I want to read about, the tactical displays of Boca Juniors during the 2020-2021 season in Argentina, I can click myself into it now and be there in about 3 minutes. Whereas that wasn't available before. Everyone has information available, meaning that you're able to educate yourself, which I love. But I just think that education and understanding what you're viewing doesn't make you necessarily an expert overnight because of it. I think that I'm not saying that you need to be a former footballer or have a UEFA badge or whatever to be able to have an opinion about football. But I just don't think that tactics translates into you being a number one manager at all times. But I think that what you need is that great mix of man management, of understanding where you are, of leadership qualities, and yes, of tactics and football understanding, footballing IQ. And you can also add sort of the X factor of having player experience that a lot of players do have, but I don't think is necessary. But I just think that if you only look at tactics and have tactics as the one reason as to why a manager fails and why a manager succeeds, I just don't think you understand football that well.
Well, I also think, again, like we need to have a look at the reaction and see what happens. A big thing for United, obviously, is the amount of semi-finals that we've reached, and obviously haven't gone that extra step. Obviously, Ole hasn't managed to get that trophy in a bag. You said Ole, the fact that we didn't go that extra step, the fact that we didn't make it through to the final, the fact that we didn't win those trophies because he is a born winner. But also, how much do you think, looking at United this season, that he may have learned from those experiences?
You would think he has. I mean, considering he hasn't really been in those types of finals with a team like Man United. I mean, I think that those finals and those semifinals are there's so fine margins that decide whether you win or lose. And he's always been on the losing end of it. But yes, that is definitely 100% one of the things that you could argue against him, that he's not been able to deliver in those big defining matches. I think also the game against, was it Leipzig, when they needed to win to qualify for the next round of the Champions League and they were down 2-0 within the first 20 minutes. I mean, those types of games, I completely understand, are used against them because those are the types of games where you need leadership first and foremost. I don't think you need tactics. I think you need leadership and a mentality within the team that he was not able to transform at the time, which again counts against him being sort of a, would you call it a world-class or top-level or A-class manager in Europe. I think that has more to do with that than tactics. But that is definitely one of the things that people will argue against them. And if they go to the Europa League semifinal again and they lose there, or if they exit in the as the FA Cup semifinal, for example, if they make it there, definitely you have to use those things against them. You have to use those aspects against him whenever you're going to summarize his managerial career at Manchester United. But I hope and I think, for his sake, that he's been able to learn from it, and that he perhaps looks at and has a different entry point into going into those types of games going forward, because what he's done now just hasn't worked. But I wonder as well if he has the natural leaders within this, or has had the natural leaders in the squad rather, to take those sorts of decisions on pitch that a manager just can't take. I'm not going to say that I'm going to try and excuse him in any way, because it falls on him. But I just wonder if he's been able to do Man United have the type of leaders on the pitch that he has seeked and that he has had, for example, at Molde in the past, and that he himself played with at Man United?
I completely agree with that, and also agree with the fact that semi-finals are fine margins and small margins, which sometimes you can't plan for those margins. So you have to live and you have to learn, and the proof of being a pudding. I think the City game, they completely outplayed us. We can't turn around for that League Cup tie and go, do you know what? Solskjaer's lost another semi-final. We got outplayed by a brilliant City team in that game.
That's tactical, and that's a little bit tactical. That's a little bit tactical. We have to look at the tactics for that one.
Yeah, a little bit tactical, but also I still think Man City do have the better players, and when they turn it on like that, they're going to beat 9 out of 10 of the best clubs in Europe. So I also think of it from that point of view. But additionally, can I just hit on one point there that you made as well about the leaders? Because I think it's quite an interesting one, because I feel like Ole is starting to bring those in. But I also, because I do think Harry Maguire's the leader. I really do. And I do think he is a good captain of the club. I also do believe that Bruno Fernandes is a leader because of his experience being a captain at Sporting and the experience he has on the international stage. Cavani. Now, I would go as far as to say that Cavani is the only out-and-out leader within that side who has been there, done that. Because you've got to think about it this way. Bruno Fernandes is a leader, but at Sporting Lisbon, he wasn't in multiple cup finals. He wasn't in a team that was winning the league every season. So still, when it comes down to those games and those key decisions to be made in those games, Bruno Fernandes is still relatively inexperienced, as is Harry Maguire. So I do agree with you, Jonas, when it comes to having leaders like people like Mata, Cavani, Matic, who have been in games like that, who have had a career full of those moments, who can make those decisions and help guide others. You'd say they're probably the three at the club, aren't they? Maybe De Gea as well, but De Gea, I think, struggles with his leadership from the back as it is. So it's
There's a huge elephant. There's a huge elephant in the room here that you're not pinpointing. Paul Pogba.
Yes, good point. Pogba as well. Yeah, very good point. Yeah. Do you think that's what Ole? Do you think that is one of the main reasons why he really did put his arm around him after those comments and potentially did manage to bring the best out of him, because he sees him as one of those players?
He should be one of those players, and I think that's sort of what he views. And I think that if you look at Paul Pogba and what he's achieved, I mean, I thought that when Man United brought him back, when they paid all that money to bring him back, I was saying that that's Man United finally having found their Steven Gerrard, their Frank Lampard, the heirs, I suppose, to Roy Keane in midfield. I'm not the same type of player, but the guy who was going to be the leader in midfield. And I thought that Paul Pogba was going to be able to take that role. And it was just surprising to me, or it's been surprising to me rather, that he's not been able to do that, considering he's also won a World Cup with France. He's been able to play in big games with Man United. We won the Europa League with Man United. He played with Zlatan Ibrahimovic, was sort of passed the guard on to him when he left. I mean, there's been so many things for Paul Pogba to do in order to grasp that leadership role, but he's just not been able to do it. And I don't know if that is down to Pogba not having that sort of profile, and perhaps a lot of people, perhaps even including myself, thinking that he's going to be able to take a role that he's just not comfortable with. But at the same time, it's kind of odd seeing a guy who was such a star and such a huge presence not being able to be more of a leader. I can't think of a player, at least not off the top of my head, who has that big of a profile and is that big of a star, but is that little of a natural leader, seemingly.
Potentially, it could be that he's not as vocal, potentially in his leadership, but he needs to be given those moments and be put in those key moments to be able to showcase what he can do. Because let's remember, a leader doesn't just vocalize their leadership. True. They set an example, and they play by example. We've got a couple of players who do both of that, but maybe that's the type of leader Paul Pogba is, which is maybe why he didn't get that armband. Maybe he's got his own little clique behind the scene and isn't as, open and expansive with the way he leads. Who knows?
I agree, but if you look at, for example, the City game in which they turned the game around and they won 3-2, and City had to wait to win the league, when Pogba scored those 2 goals in quick succession, I mean, he was a leader. I mean, he looked the leader. He was pounding his chest and pounding the badge and kind of spurring everyone on. And I think when you see those moments and you see those games that he has, everyone's sort of, okay, here he comes. Now this is, the let me formally reintroduce myself moment of Paul Pogba. And I mean, look at him. He finally became the leader that everyone's been looking for, and he's performing in the big games. And then the next 2 and 3, he's sort of hiding around. He's sort of, why is this happening? And and I think that's sort of been kind of Paul Pogba's Man United career summarized in a way, that he has like 1 or 2 games where he's like the best midfielder in the world, and it's just and I just hope for his sake and for every Man United fan's sake that he finally starts to feel his role within the team, and that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has been able to use his man management magic, I suppose, and get him a solid role in the team. And I was reading a few of the comments now from Mina Raiola, where he sort of hinted at, there might be a way back for him to sign a new deal, and so I think it would be interesting.
Go on, Jonas. What do you think? Does he stay this summer?
No, I think he leaves.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's also see what happens between now and the end of the season, because who knows? A couple of a confidence trophy maybe, or some sort of, look what we've done with you, Paul. Let's see where we can go with it, kind of thing. Yeah. Who can afford him? Like, what type of deal do United want to get out of that? What business do we want to do?
That's the one. That's the one.
Isn't it? Hangs on so much. I also just want to hit on that City moment as well. I want to play devil advocate slightly. I saw how he acted in the second half of that City game as an FU to Mourinho, because that was around the same time that Mourinho was really criticising him, and that relationship was really taking a dip. And as much as I do agree with you, it shows what type of player an aggressive Paul Pogba can be. Also slightly saw it as him going that I'm going to outlast you at this club. I'm the main man here. F you, like type of thing. Which isn't a bad thing when you're under that sort of pressure and you're dealing with that sort of manager. But also, yeah, it's one of those. We haven't seen that Paul Pogba enough, have we? Just quickly, Jonas, because I don't obviously turn this into a Paul Pogba show. Obviously, Ollie Potter 100, fantastic CR manager doing that. I just want to hit on one last thing quickly. Ollie, the future of his managerial career. You made it clear that now we're getting to a point where that argument that he wouldn't manage another Premier League club after United is bang out the window. He could do a job at many Premier League clubs, which goes to show what improvements he has made. Do you feel like Ollie's got a long-term future at United? Do you think United can win a Premier League title under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? What do you see? Have you seen enough yet?
No, I haven't. It's so difficult, isn't it? Because it's just...
It's a fairy tale if you say yes. We want to say yes because it's a fairy tale for United fans.
But I have to be objective as well in looking at it. I mean, I think that it's too early to say, but I think that he's shown a lot of glimpses that lends credence to it, that there could be something special there. But I also think that a lot of the other previous managers did that. I think Mourinho did that. I think Van Gaal at times did that as well. Perhaps not David Moyes, but I suppose Mourinho and Van Gaal had moments here and there. I mean, Van Gaal when he won the FA Cup as well. But I'd love for it to happen because of the fairy tale, and obviously because I know it would mean a lot to Norwegian football and so forth as well. But at the same time, I think that I don't think Man United wins the season this season. I don't think that. I think that they need a few more things, but they are a team that's looking to be developing. They are a team that looks. If I wouldn't change too much with this team, is what I'd say. So I think that he definitely, if they remain within the top 3, or not top 4, I should say, which they look certain to do. And get the Champions League and perhaps make a final in the FA Cup, perhaps a final in the Europa League. Definitely keep him on for at least another year and perhaps build even further around him, perhaps even give him a new contract. Who knows? But there are things there that makes me believe that it could happen. But I mean, he had such an incredible start as well, and then there was the slump, and then he bounced back, and then there's been a wee slump, and then there's been another bounce back, and then he's been a game away from being on the brink. So it's just so difficult to say, because it's still, even though they stabilized the ship a little bit, I still think there are few things there that needs to be tweaked and corrected and improved upon for me to definitely say, yes, this is a team that can win the Premier League, But I think that he's shown that he's not out of his depth. That is, I think, and I think that's I think that's the one thing that you can take away from his time at Man United. Now, he's not out of his depth. But if that is going to make him a Premier League champion with Man United, I think it's too early to say.
I agree. I think we're unfortunately consistently inconsistent with our performances, but I do believe in the route that he is taking the club with the playing staff and the way he is adapting. I now believe we are almost rid of the players who shouldn't really be in and around a Manchester United squad. And I think actually the next couple of transfer windows will tell, because I think we all know the players really, that United need to bring in. I think if you have a look at the world football map, we need a centre-back, we need a defensive midfielder, we need a right winger, and we need a striker. But these players do not need to be squad players. We don't need to gamble with them. We need to bring in first-team players now, and he needs to be ruthless with those other players at the club who are contributing to us being consistently inconsistent. And I think that's what we'll see. That's what will make us, the belief on him doing that and him doing that, I think that's what will make us title challengers. Look, a question is always going to be raised. Have we potentially missed an opportunity this year? Maybe, with the way the world is, with the way other teams have been, potentially. But hindsight is such an incredible thing that without it, we wouldn't have the many conversations we're having on this channel. But
I think one aspect, just before you go on, I think one aspect is this season is the exception that does prove the rule, though, because I think that Man United have been able to close the gap because of the pandemic, perhaps.
I agree.
But I think that they'd be even further away if the pandemic hadn't happened. So it has helped them in a way, but they've been very, very good at understanding that they could close the gap, even though they didn't bring in the likes of Jadon Sancho. They've improved so much that the gap has been closed.
We have also put Manchester United's name back into the conversation. So teams are now looking at where United are as well, which does a lot mentally to different clubs. When you've got a club that historical, of that prestige with such a quality squad as well. I personally believe this is the best squad United have had in years. I would even say potentially even better than the last couple under Sir Alex, which won the Premier League title. I honestly believe this squad is really, really good, and it's got a fantastic mixture. But again, I do think that the football has changed since back then. You couldn't just bring one person into a side like a Robin van Persie and win the title anymore. There's got to be a refresh. There's got to be a balance about it. And I do think Ole has always battled with the balance of that midfield. I don't think he likes it, and he knows he needs someone. Again, a partner for Harry Maguire. I don't think he does really trust Baye or Lindelof, but if he has to pick one of them, it's always, I think, Lindelof. So do you know what? I'm happy because I think what Ole has brought in is he's brought in Wan-Bissaka, who's going to be United's right back for decades, getting the best again out of Luke Shaw, and has actually given a platform to get the best out of him by bringing in Tellez and so to speak, causing him to come into action and fight for a place in the team. I think Harry Maguire is a Manchester United centre-back all day long. I think he's terrific. I really like Harry Maguire. And then in the midfield, the development of Scott McTominay, Fred under Ole's management has come on so much, and he doesn't get any credit for that. Michael Carrick and the guys around him, fantastic. Bruno Fernandes, what a signing. Greenwood looks twice the player he did at the start of the season over the last couple of weeks. Rashford's come on a long way, but still needs to improve, and those improvements he needs to make is in himself. And then Cavani, what a signing. What a signing. Don't get me wrong, I still think if Ole would, he'd chop off your hand for Haaland, but still, what a signing. And I still believe, actually, you know what? I still believe we will sign Haaland one day. I just feel like there's too much of a connection there with him to not do.
Yeah, so, might be. I don't think it'll happen in the summer, though.
No, I think we're another season away from that happening if it does. But then again, Jonas, if we look at Dortmund and where they're at, it only takes a slump in them for not have Champions League football for Haaland to potentially look at that and go, well.
But I think there's a different player that they'd rather sell than Haaland at this point anyways, because Haaland will come into play the season after. Unless someone goes and bids 130, 140 million euros, I don't think anyone's going to get Haaland in the summer.
But does he have that clause, which is active from this summer?
Next summer.
Oh, is it next summer? Okay. Yeah, fair enough then. Well, I think either way, Sancho's the one. If we're going to get anyone from Dortmund this summer, that would be at United. But I'm still not 100% on that. I really do believe that they've been absolutely shocked by Amad Diallo coming into that side. And from what I've heard, there's really good things being said about him. So we'll have to wait and see. Look, I want the beautiful dream to happen. I really want Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to lift the Premier League trophy at United. And do you know what? People criticise him, criticise his teams. But I actually think that if we look back over the past 100 games that he has managed in this league, what a journey. And as United fans, we should be extremely proud of this guy who led us in 99 to that famous night. Everything he done afterwards, the servant he was to this club, and now the fact of what he's doing as a manager. I think there are now, Jonas, I don't know if you agree, more positives about Ole as a manager of Manchester United than negatives.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Which says he's gone a long way. Jonas, thank you for jumping on. We're going to have to get you on soon to chat about some other bits and pieces that's not just Ole, but the insight you've given today with ex-professional players at Mulder, At Mulder.
Mulder.
I'm learning. Even though I butchered Haaland's name from what you just mentioned there.
Yeah, I can help you with that one. It's instead of Ha, it's Ho.
Haaland. Yeah. There
Haaland.
we go. Yeah. We'll just do a whole. Seeing as every kids are at home at the moment, everyone's working from home. We're just going to do Norwegian with Jonas one week and just have it out of the way and done with.
You keep butchering every single Norwegian name that we have. Haaland, Ødegaard. You keep butchering every single one that we have over there.
It's just
even Sander Berge. That's even wrong as well. It's Sander Berge, the Sheffield United player. Everyone keeps butchering his name as well.
Could you imagine John Motson in commentary? I don't know if you've ever heard him, but actually saying that, he would sound like an absolute clown. Thank you, buddy, for jumping on. Stay safe, won't you? And we'll speak soon, guys. Thank you for watching. Get over to youtube.com/AllForUnited. Hit that subscribe button. It'd be good to have you with us over there. Let's keep growing the Red community, and we're going to give you a chance to win some fantastic prizes over the next couple of weeks as we do the draws for our Football Town apparel. Stick with us. We're back on Monday with a big show. Someone who isn't so pro, Ollie, Graham Bailey, who's a journalist over here in the UK, is going to be joining me to eat his words on what he said on the channel. I think it was October when he was saying United should sack him. Let's get him on and let's put it to him. Speak to you guys in a bit. I'll see you soon. I'll see you on Monday. Take care, guys. Bye.